Very often here in Tactical Manager TV, we cover the US men's national team players abroad. However, it's not that often that we actually get to hear from a US men's national team player abroad himself about his journey in Europe. But hey, nothing to fear, because Erik Palmer-Brown is here. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV, and welcome to our mini-series of this week, a 2-episode mini-series with Erik Palmer-Brown from Panathinaikos in Greece. And this is probably one of the best player interviews we've ever had in this channel because of how open and honest Erik Palmer-Brown was about his career abroad, the US men's national team, Greg Berhalter, and much more. Today's episode is episode 1 of this 2-episode mini-series, and this one will be heavily focused on Erik Palmer-Brown's career abroad, of why did he move to Manchester City so early in his career, the good, the bad, the ugly of playing in Europe, the fans that can be toxic, the fans that are wonderful, a conversation he had with Greg Berhalter about one of his transfers, and much more. Now, episode 2 will be out the day after this episode. Maybe it's already out by the time you're watching this, and it'll be 100% focused on the current US men's national team players from an inside perspective, from the players, the coaching staff, much more. It's a great episode, one of my favorites. So you know what? Sit back, relax, get some popcorn, hit the like button or don't, and let's bring in Erik Palmer-Brown. All right, everyone, welcome to part 1 here with Erik Palmer-Brown of this mini-series, 2 episodes. The first one, we're going to be talking about his experience abroad, right, as a U.S. men's national team player that went abroad at a very young age, the good, the bad, the ugly, the great, the terrible, all of it. And then part 2, you can watch, we're going to talk more about the U.S. men's national team, Greg Berhalter, 2026 World Cup, and much more. But Erik, before we even start, how are you doing there in Greece?
Man, it's been really good. It's a beautiful country. Just moved into my house and just enjoying right now. We're getting ready for a stretch of games that we got a lot of games coming up with Europa League and the league. So just really excited to be here, and just everything's been unbelievable. The people, it's definitely different from a lot of the clubs I've been to, where it's like going out in public, I'm like noticed a lot more, and like going out to a restaurant and like the club knows, like if you go out to a restaurant, like, oh, I heard you were out at like it's just all the players, I think, in Athens at the 3 big clubs are just really well known. So it's definitely different, but it's really fun.
And what are the 3 big clubs? You play for Panathinaikos, that's one. Olympiacos, and what's the other one?
AEK. They won the league last year.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay. And before we actually go into Greece, let's go back to the past. And let's start with your journey of heading abroad, because you went pretty much when you were allowed to, right? When you turned 18. Let's go back. You signed with Sporting Kansas City. Walk us through that path, and then I'm going to have some questions. I might interrupt you, and I have some questions in each step.
Okay, yeah. So I was in high school when I signed with Sporting. I guess that's like really long time ago now, like 2013. So signed with them then like halfway through the year. And I think that was a lot through my youth national team successes, that this club kind of bounced on the opportunities there. And within those first 2 years, I was behind like Matt Beasler, Iko Para, and at the time Kevin Ellis. And I think that time like Iko Para was the comeback player of the year. Matt Beasler was playing with the national team. Kevin Ellis had like scored like 7-8 goals at center back for one season. And so I was like nowhere near like playing unless it was Open Cup or maybe CONCACAF games, Champions League games. And so made the decision to go on loan, I think with 2 years left on my contract, to Portugal, to Porto B, and then got there mid-season, the start of the MLS season, and went and won the league that year, which was unbelievable. It was great for my experience. And then went back, finished the year there, and then went to the U20 qualifying. And that's when I think Manchester City first like came and like said that they were interested. And then after that, went back to Sporting, had games here and there again, like US Open Cup, some minutes here in the league, and then went to the World Cup. And then after that was signed with Man City on a pre-contract.
So let me ask the first question there. You went to Porto. You had an experience playing abroad. You said it was Porto B on a loan, but you guys won the league you were playing at. You were 17. You were very young at the time. Later
Yeah.
on, you ended up running your contract to Sporting Kansas City all the way to the end, and then you signed with Manchester City. Uh, there was also apparently an offer from Juventus at one point too. They tried. I think they offered $1 million. That's at least what rumors came out, assuming it was true. Was Manchester City your desired club to go to? Did you want to stay with Porto? What was going on through your mind at that time? Because again, when Manchester City calls you, and I think at that time was even Pep Guardiola there already. I don't remember that. I don't think he was yet. But was that what you wanted right away? Did you have any plans on staying in MLS? Why did you choose to go abroad? Because you could have stayed in MLS.
Yeah, no, honestly, what happened was I was just like, I wanted to stay with Kansas City. The locker room environment was unbelievable. The club is where I grew up. It just came down to like contract and the discussion of like money, where it comes down to like, this is what I think I should be paid, and the club not thinking the same. And so we just kind of like went our separate ways on that. I had the desire to play in Europe, but at that time I wasn't playing a lot, and I was like, all right, I really want to break into Kansas City's lineup. Like, I think this would be a great place to break into the lineup. And just, it came down to money with that. With Porto, so it was, I know the option was there, like they wanted to possibly buy, but I think they were in like financial troubles at that time. That's when they were like selling, like they sold Andrea Silva, Jose Sa, so other players, and they just needed like money under their books. So there was like discussion there, but I don't think they could have done it like money wise. And it wasn't like a priority. I don't think I was like one of their priorities to sign. And then when it came to Manchester City, when it came down to that, like running out my contract, it was between Manchester City and PSV, who like gave me like offers, but like just the deal on the table was like PSV offered 2.5 years compared to Manchester City's 4.5. So like financial stability, like also long-term stability. And at the time Pep was there, he had just signed, I think the year before or something like that. And then so going there, being able to see like Pep, meeting him and Mikel Arteta was like really cool. But also, like, I think going into the situation, you knew it was going to be like one of those loan things, which sucks. Like, but at the same time, I don't think there was much else that was that attractive, with PSV only offering 2.5 years. And then I would have been 23, and there was no guarantee to get into the first team football either. So with City, it was like they could use their power to like help get me on loan, get me on like good, solid like steps to building that career and building that like much needed CV for football in Europe. Because at that time, I know it's a little different now, but like as an American playing abroad, like no one respected us. No one respected American players. It
I
was
think they
just like,
still don't respect a lot of our
yeah,
players as
it
much
was
as they
gonna,
should have. Yeah, it's
yeah,
these days.
exactly. So it's still like that. I think it's changing a little bit now, but there's still a lot of doubts about like American players and stuff like that. So back then, I think it was just the best option for me to, have City, have that support group to kind of push those things through and like put their name on like my CV and stamp it.
Yeah, and I guess one silly question, then a serious question. The silly one is, did anyone ever whine about you calling it soccer? That seems a very common practice in Europe.
I changed that quick. Like I changed it real quick because the English guys, like I was at City, like doing training there for like a month and a half before I went out on loan, because it was like MLS season ended, and then I went over and trained until like the window opened, and I went late in the window to Belgium. And so the English guys just did not allow that. They did not allow me to call it
It's
soccer.
funny
So
because they made the word.
yeah,
So
I know exactly. Like
I,
that was the banter, but for me, it was learned so quick. And since then, like in Europe, I still call it football, and then sometimes I get mixed up. I'll in America, I'll cll it football now too. So it's
yeah,
just thing I call it now.
Yeah, it's just silly. At the end of the day, I would
Yeah.
just call it whatever it's called in the country that I am. If I'm in the United
Yeah,
States, it's soccer. If
exactly.
I'm in England, they want to call it football. But
Exactly.
they don't really respect that here, though. If a Brit comes
Yeah,
here, they'll call it football. But
exactly.
now, more serious question. You talked about the loans, which we even joke about Chelsea having their loan army, where they sign a bunch of players and start loaning them out.
Yeah.
Did you
It's
have
not a
any
joke. It's the same. It's the same in
for Man
Manchester.
City? But
Yeah.
you talked about the positives of it because you built your resume, you got experience in different leagues, and you got a lot of playing time. Did you notice any negatives of the constant maybe moving, not stabilizing one club? Because it feels
Yeah.
like as a player, getting a 1 year loan, 2 year loan, that seems all right. When it becomes 3 or 4, we saw that with Matt Miazga too, right? With Chelsea. It
Nah,
kind of,
yeah.
I'm just trying to put myself in your place. You're like changing countries every year, changing
Yeah.
coaches.
Yeah. That's I think the biggest negative of it. I think also like I had conversations with Matt and we were both in the same situation of just not having that stability. Like even um just going from club to club from year to year, you just like you said, you're going from a different country, a different culture. So you got to learn the new culture. You got to find a new apartment. You got to like pack up all your stuff every year, like where it's like, I don't know where I'm going next year. So can I leave this here until I find out where I'm going? And then you have to go get it. And like,
Mhm.
it's just those first few months are like really like just tough to settle in. And I think that's the biggest negative of being on loan is like not having a place, not knowing like where you're going to be the next season. Um, but also like on the flip side of that, like if you're on a team like I was in Mac Breda, like if you get relegated, like at least you know like your pay cut, like you're not getting that kind of thing that's happening to you, which also sucks. Like you're definitely going probably somewhere else, but at the same time, it's part of it. It's what you signed up for. I think it being Manchester City, like I said earlier, and probably Chelsea with Matt Miazga too. They still have a lot of pull, but and it's good for your CV. But like having that stable base, and I think that too was something that I was looking for when I signed this contract was like being in one place more than 1 year, 2 years, and finding like a home.
That's interesting that you said. So let's dive into that because it seems like in Europe, the first club that you found a home where you were actually signed on a permanent was Troyes. Troyes? How do you say it?
It's Troyes, like they say, like
Troyes,
yeah, yeah,
which is
Troyes.
just Troy. It sounds like Troy.
It's
Like
spelled Troyes, yeah,
yeah,
like Troyes, but it's pronounced Troyes.
Troyes. Like my
Yeah,
French ain't very good, and they were playing
it's
Liga. Liga, I got
yeah,
that right in France. And you had one season, one normal season. Then the second season, the relegation battle, which eventually led to Troyes' relegation. We even interacted once with a fan bothering you on Twitter, a
yeah,
French fan. And I know people have talked about a little bit of like how French soccer, French football culture can be a bit crazy. We heard that a little bit about Messi talking about, Neymar just talked about it. So why don't you talk a little bit about your experience in France? The relegation battle, I want to hear about that too, the pressure, everything, because it's something we don't have in the United States, in MLS in particular. Well, we don't have it in general in the United States. Our sports culture doesn't really have promotion relegation, NBA, NFL, Major League Soccer. Even if you watch USL, there's no promotion relegation. Can you walk us through that experience, the good, the bad, what was ugly, what helped you as a player, what hurt you as a player?
yeah. So I guess I'm gonna start from the beginning with Troyes. So the first thing was like it was I was going into my like last 2 years with City on my contract, and I was I had talked to Greg and stuff because this was like going into the year for like getting ready to go to the World Cup and stuff like that. And he told me Austria is not a good enough league for me to be in to like push into the national team, and which I was like, okay, I understand. So had to make a move, and at that time I was headed to Venice, to Italy. I was about to sign a contract there, and then something popped up on my medical where they said something was wrong with my heart, and which was like really scary, and it was like really unexpected. So I had to go back to Manchester, did a bunch of testing, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't see anything wrong. Like we don't know what they saw." It was really really weird, but it is what it is. So it came down to kind of like the last couple of days of the transfer window, and City Group owns Troyes, and they were like, "This is kind of like what's left." Like, and I was like, "You know what? It's League One. Like, let's go." Went there, Ligue 1, And I got there, and the coach like kind of brought me and a couple other City players and Patrick Roberts. And he was just like, well, he didn't say this to us because he needed a translator. And he was just like, listen, because this team had just came up from the second division. And he was like, listen, I got my guys here. Like, I didn't really want you guys, but like, this is what City Group wanted. And so, like, if you get your opportunity, like, play, like, but don't plan on it. Like, and so it was like, oh, like,
What a
this
great
is going to
leader.
be, it's going to be a long year. Like, so it was not good. So I knew I was just there, like, training, just doing my best to, like, stay as positive as possible. And I guess, like, touching on a bit of, like, what Messi and Neymar felt like it's definitely a different culture in France, and, like, definitely, like, with the people and the players, they are so talented, and you have so many, like, athletic players and good, like, technical players, and the league is very solid. But, like, when it comes to, like, certain things like infrastructure and all these things, like, it's just not the best, or like maybe like the most like hardworking. And if things aren't going like a certain way, like, it's more kind of like, oh, okay, like, whatever, like, we'll leave it, or we'll do, like, we won't do it, or like that kind of thing. Like, screw this kind of mentality.
A bad
And
attitude, essentially, as a professional
yeah, yeah,
athlete. Yeah.
exactly. So it's different. And I don't want to say like all people or all friends, but
Mhm.
like, I would say a majority of the way it went. And so when I knew I wasn't playing, like, that's when I was like, I got to move. I got to leave this, like, place. Like, so this is in December. I'm like, I'm trying to get a move. And then our coach got fired and a new coach came in, and he was just essentially like, I want you to stay here. And I was like, well, I don't have a move yet, but like, the plan is to leave. Like, but I came back, and then the first couple games, still while the window was open, I played, and I played well. And so I was like, you know what, this might be the best place for me to end up staying. Like, if the coach is going to stay, and like, we're going to get some results here and there, like, because it wasn't looking good on like the relegation side either. We were still kind of bottom of the table, but midway through the season, and I was playing well. So I was like, you know what, this might be the best place to push, like, for the national team. And so I kept playing, and then ended up staying at Troyes, and then signing the deal because I was into my last year with City. So they were like, we need you to like resign so you don't walk free. So signed with Troyes, and then for 2 years. And then what happened after that? So then
Well,
I got called to the national
then
team.
you
Yeah.
got called in the national team, and then the second season was the
Then the
relegation
second,
season.
yeah, then the second season was the relegation. The first season was still kind of relegation. Towards the end of the year, we were like, wow, this is a like gauntlet of games we had. We were towards the bottom of the table, and we had like, I think it was like Nice, PSG, Lille, like back to back to back, and it was like, we have to get like 4 points from these three games somehow. Like, and it was like, PSG, like, we were all chalking it up as like a loss. Like, they were coming at us with, Messi, Neymar, Mbappe, Di Maria at the time was there. Like, it was like, this is so, but ended up going to PSG, getting the draw, and then beating Lille, because they had like 3 red cards in that game or something like that. It was crazy. And we had 3 penalties. So ended up surviving relegation. And then going into the next season, it was like, all right, like, I've established myself as a starter. I was playing League 1, which is a top 5 league. Like, this is the World Cup year. Like, I need to be playing to like push myself. And like, I don't think a move at this point in time would help me. Like, because then you got to settle in somewhere else. You got to like learn the system, all these things. And so I was like, I'm going to stay at Troyes, and stayed at Troyes in the beginning of the season. I'm trying to remember now. We were okay. I think we were like middle of the table when they decided to fire our coach. Like, and that was just because of, from what I understand, like, Citigroup didn't believe in his philosophy of play. Like, they want all their clubs to kind of play the Manchester City way, and we weren't playing that way. So they fired him and brought in a new coach. And then I think the first 2 games we got a draw and then a win. And then after that, we didn't win a single game until the end of the season. Or no, for the rest of the season. We didn't win from January 3rd on. And so Yeah,
And
that
how was
was like
fan pressure in regards to that in France? Because we
yeah, it
talked
was
about how I remember the first time I interacted with you on Twitter directly, at least it was a Trough fan was just talking. It was like
yeah,
a
they were
random account. I even told you about there's no reason for you to interact. It's like a account with a fake profile picture.
yeah, I know, yeah.
Was that something you experienced on a like outside of Twitter, right? Because Twitter is
Yeah.
all social media. Did you experience that in real life?
I wouldn't say like you have your good fans like that like show up every like not to say you have bad fans like there's both. You have good and bad. Like we'd have our ones that would show up every week to the training facility, like say they would want better, like talk to us like casually. Um, but then you have like your ultras or your super fans, and like obviously they weren't happy with the play. Like I can completely understand. Um, and it wasn't like horrible because I think like those bigger games like PSG Marseille, like I think most of the fans are still like PSG Marseille fans like in France. Like it's either you're one or the other. Um, so like when you play those clubs, like I think they're more there for like the spectacle to see Marseille or PSG. And they for me, the fan experience wasn't like terrible, but there were like it's times where you like run into like a fan here or there like saying something that sometimes I wouldn't understand or just going
Probably
at
for the
you in
best.
French. Yeah,
Probably for the best.
exactly. So, and I've had that in other places too in Breda where like after every game, like if we lost, we'd go around the field and like you have little kids throwing like drinks at you and flipping you off and stuff because that's just like the culture and like they bleed their colors and their team and like their club. So it's definitely different in that aspect of like the pressure from the fans and like what they feel for their like club and especially when there's relegation and like your club's going to lose like a bunch of money compared to like in
Yeah.
American
You
sports
see,
where
I appreciate passion of the sports, and we talked about this a little bit off camera about me growing up in Brazil, which is quite similar to
yeah,
what you described, the passion of the fans. But I do think abroad there's a little bit of an over exaggeration of how fans live something. Which, at the end of the day, soccer is a beautiful sport, a great sport, but it is a sport.
yeah,
It's entertainment. It's not meant for you to
yeah,
actually um, live and die by that. If you understand what
yeah,
I'm saying, it's like you're gonna root,
100%, yeah,
but there's sometimes they take it too far, and you're mentioning a few of them. And that's what I wanted to ask you before we move on to one more topic and we move on to part two. uh, Differences between MLS and abroad. I know you didn't experience MLS maybe enough, right?
yeah.
You have many more years abroad, and maybe if you could go back, I don't know if you would do anything different in regards to when you go abroad, where you go, the decision. So I have two questions for you. One, talk a little about what you notice of differences in culture and league, the play in the league. And two, I have a question about a player that I think you definitely know him. I believe you're in the same roster as him. For example, Jesus Ferreira, right, that plays for FC Dallas. It's always been like this controversy in regards to most fans, including myself, don't want him the national team. We think there's better options at the nine, but at the same time, there's also talk of like there's something there, and if he wants to maximize his potential, maybe it's time for him to move to a better league. Considering he scored almost 20 goals last season in MLS, and he's on track to getting something close to that again. If you were to talk to Jesus, and I don't even know if you talked about him, do you think he is the type of player that you would say, yeah, I think it's time for him to move to maybe a top five league, or you think no, stability, being a starter, minutes, what would matter in your? What do you think of maybe this specific situation? I don't know if you want to talk about a player because then you'd be giving your opinion. That if you don't want to, that's okay. But for his specifically, what advice would you give? You are older than him after all, and you've experienced it abroad. Do you think he would benefit from this?
I think anyone would benefit from this. Like for me, like no matter who it is, even if it wasn't Jesus, I think anyone benefits from like coming here and putting themselves like in an uncomfortable position because no matter where you go, I think it's going to be uncomfortable. You're away
Mhm.
from family and friends. I did it at a young age, and I remember just like being in my hotel, like because I lived in like the Holiday Inn, like hotel apartments in Portugal, and like my friends, it was like my friend's freshman year of college, and I'm seeing like their Snapchat stories, and I'm so jealous. I'm just like out here like, oh my gosh, like what have I signed up for? Like I don't speak the language, like I don't speak Portuguese, and I was just like, this is wow. Like, besides like football, soccer, I did not have like a life outside. So I was like, this sucks. Like this. And so those are the things in that you definitely like would sacrifice like coming overseas. But like for Jesus, it's what he thinks is best for him. I think the end of the day, like the most important thing for me, even being over here, is playing. Like if you're not playing, then like you're not going to be in the national team fold anyway. So like if he came over here and he went to a club, then like yeah, maybe he gets the exposure like environment that like okay, it's like every day like you're and you're not to say every day you're not like grinding in the MLS, but like every day where there's pressure of the fans, the league, like and if you're not up to it, like it's like you could be done and like the coach just kind of puts you to the side like my first coach did in France. Like it's impossible to like kind of get not impossible, but it's tough to get back into the rhythm of things. Like when you're not playing and then, you know, like you're maybe getting put down with the second team or the B team and having to go on like 8-hour bus trips to play like some team you never heard of in the second division of France or something like that. Like those are the times where you're just like really questioning like if I would have stayed. And you know, like for me too, it's just financially, like, is it the right decision financially? Is it the like, is he going to get the same money that he's making in MLS abroad? And all those things, like, where you got to take care of your family, you got to take care of yourself. Like, those things are all questions you got to ask yourself as an individual. And if you're playing good football, like at whatever level, like, and like you've seen it from the national team, they'll call in MLS guys over. It doesn't matter where you're playing. Like, so if that's the case, like, do what is best for you. And if like there's no like, I don't know, like if that's your goal to be in the national team fold and like you see that other players are getting called in from like the same league you're in or like and you're doing scoring 20 goals a year, like why not stay?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and it's very hard to come to a conclusion. I think for the most part, the tougher environment, the tougher competition you face, the higher the odds of you maximizing your potential. But then
Yeah.
you can use examples like Lyndon Donovan, that was one of the best U.S. men's national team players ever, and he pretty
Yeah.
much he did go to Europe, but like for a few months and back to MLS, and his career was in MLS. If we really
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah. But I
but
think everyone's different too in that, like, since like, cause maybe like I said, like we were using Jesus for this, like maybe he comes over here and he doesn't do as well. Like I'm not saying that he wouldn't, but like he
Mhm.
doesn't do as well. And then he kind of like sets him like you said, he's still kind of he's young. Like he's still young for his age. Like what is he, 22 now?
I
28.
think he just turned 22. Yeah.
Yeah, 22. So like he's still got time. Like he's still got plenty of time, and I don't think that's what we realize. Like all our players, like I get we want to challenge them and like send them, but like too when I was young and like I think that's one thing like that was nice about being on loan is that I did get to come back home for that year between 19 and 20 and like really get to like live more of that like time of my life and like see my friends and like maybe go up to their college and visit them instead of just being stuck in a hotel apartment or like in a country where I don't really have that many friends besides my football friends because, doing that is really tough. But like you said, the other side of it, it does expose you to like, all right, this is it. Like, like football, soccer is my life. Like I said, off the pitch in Portugal, like that's where I learned like, okay, I can't wait to go to training to like do my best because like that's all I have. Like if I don't do my best, if I'm not in this team playing, like then what am I here for?
Yeah, so I think this does it for this segment. I wanted to go through that. Hopefully, people got, or U.S. men's national team fans got a better perspective now of a player playing abroad. Thank you very much for all the details also you provided. It didn't really seem like you held back for the most
Nah,
part, which I
yeah.
truly appreciate that as well.
Maybe a little bit on the like French part, but like I think you guys have heard a lot from other players too, like Messi and Neymar, and you see that it's different. It's definitely different. And like I think also you can see too in the French teams in, Champions League right now, like not doing so well. I think that's where you find the the difference too in those clubs and stuff like that. So
So now let's say you're in a better place. Maybe the Greek league is not as rich as the French league, not as competitive. Maybe that's something we could say because money
yeah,
does bring players, but you're in a better place, more comfortable. and still in a competitive environment right now.
Yeah, and I think for me too, like making this decision to come to Greece was like not only for like finding like stability and but like to be playing at a team that's fighting for the top of the league. Like I haven't done that in my career. I haven't
True.
like since
True.
Portugal, Porto B. Like I had not been playing in a team that's fighting for the top of the league. And this team, I can tell like the difference between the teams I've been on and this team that like everything matters. Like even though if we're playing, you know, Volos away or anything, like these games matter. And like we haven't played any derbies yet, but like the way they're speaking about these derbies is just the intensity. The fans aren't like our fans aren't allowed at those like grounds. Their fans aren't allowed like at our ground. Like it's I'm like so excited for it. And like to see our Champions League qualifier in the Olympic Stadium against Braga was like 65,000 plus fans, like with lasers, and like it's intense. It's like these Greek fans, they really they love their football and their basketball. I've heard so much about like their basketball too, like that they're like into it. So it's really exciting.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for watching part 1. Part 2, we're going to focus more on the U.S. men's national team, probably a shorter segment. Drop a like before you go, and we'll see you guys in part 2.